From the Corner Office is brought to you by Synovus Bank, championing business growth through trusted, relationship-driven banking throughout the Gulf Coast region. Jon Kaupla with the Center for Executive and Leadership Education at the USF Muma College of Business is both an academic and a businessman. He runs a leadership program at a college now, but has also worked for large corporations in real estate, investing, and retail at the Kohl's corporate headquarters. The lessons Jon brings to his work every day mirror what the Business Observer strives for in its stories online and in print. To read more, subscribe. Go to businessobserverfl.com.
Hello and welcome to the Business Observer's From the Corner Office podcast. I'm Mark Gordon, managing editor of the Business Observer. Today's guest is Jon Kaupla, the Associate Dean and Executive Director for the Center for Executive and Leadership Education at the Muma College of Business at the University of South Florida. Jon, welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate being here.
Excellent. I love that. That's a long title, but it's a good title. We're going to get into that. We're going to talk about what you do and what the Center for Executive and Leadership Education is and your role in it. But before we even get into leadership and that thing, Jon, we're going to start with the audience to get to know you a little bit better with some first questions, some first ever. So what, Jon, was your first car?
Oh, man. It's a great story, but it was a 1974 Pontiac Le Mans. It was one of those tanks of a car.
Yes.
Yeah, but it was a notorious gas guzzler. So, and that was the days when I'm dating myself, but I would put 50 cents worth of gas in the tank, and it was a good first car, and a lot of good memories of that vehicle.
My first car was a 1981 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme, and
that's
very
another
similar
big tank of a car. Yeah,
another tank. I mean, those doors, you had to use two hands to put the door. And yes, I think I put $1.25 of gas in.
Exactly.
That was back in the day. What was the experience? Sort of the first time you lived on your own? Was it college? What was that like?
Yeah, it was college. Went to Florida State University, and it was my first time moving out of the house, and on top of it, having a roommate who was notoriously messy, and I grew up in a very rigid, clean home. My mom was a clean freak and just loved to have everything clean. And
yeah,
well, whatever you grow up in, you're assuming that's how everybody lives.
Right. You don't know any better.
Wasn't the case with I won't name him, but he knows who he is, and it was bad. When I moved in, the bathtub was literally black. It was so I was pretty depressed, and of course very homesick, which I think we all go through when we have our first experience.
Yeah, but you persevered. Maybe we'll be talking about persevering through challenges in leadership.
That's right.
And Jon, what was your first job?
My first job was with Wendy's. I was 15. I had to get, I don't know if you remember this, workers permits, but yeah, I had to get a workers permit to be able to start at 15. And, but I was thrilled to be getting my own paycheck and have the freedom to start, buying whatever I wanted to buy. So it was, and talk about leadership. I learned a lot of lessons. I think about that now. My manager was probably 19, but he really taught a lot about, the discipline and having to take direction from other leaders than your parents, which is kind of what you're accustomed to, and doing things differently and by particular procedures and processes. So I of course I didn't appreciate what I was learning at that age, but certainly reflecting back, I learned a lot.
Yeah, I mean, my first job was McDonald's as a 14-year-old on Long Island, New York, and same thing. You don't realize the lessons you're learning, both about what's good management and a little bit about what's not so good management.
Oh,
right?
Yes. Both good and the bad.
Yeah, you see both sides. So, Jon, starting in your career, we're going to start now in the current. Tell us about the Center for Executive and leadership education at USF. What is that, and what is your role there?
Yeah, so I do lead the center. So, associate dean is a very academic title, but in essence, I'm the director of this new center, and we launched in September. So we're new in this marketplace, and we do this. This is non-credit, non-degree, but university-based continuing education, and we're geared towards the mid to executive level leaders in organizations. So this is and we do have other centers at the university that serve, frontline leaders and individual contributors, but this is really meant for those that not only have direct reports, but often have several layers underneath them. So sometimes we call them the coach of the coach because they're actually coaching people that are coaching others or leading others. So kind of think of those multiple levels. So it's some of the enterprise type skills and behaviors that we teach at the center, and it's focused both on programs that we have open that individuals can sign up for, but we also have, and quite frankly, the bigger part of our business is what we would call custom. These are bespoke programs that we develop for a particular organization to help address their leadership development needs, and that can be more impactful when you think about adapting for culture and language and industry, etc.
Yeah, and so prior to this academic side of your career, you worked in corporate America, corporations. You worked for Kohl's, Robert W. Baird and Company, some other brands. What are some lessons in that corporate side of your career that stand out to you about what makes good leaders?
Yeah. Well, one of the lessons that I learned early on, and by the way, I got into leadership accidentally. That was not on my career plan, especially as early as it happened. But one of the lessons I learned pretty quickly is the importance of peer relationships. I spent a lot of time with my direct reports, which had been my peers previously. So, but I leaned into that, and of course, naturally, you manage upwards pretty well with your boss. But what I didn't pay attention to, and what ended up really stalling my career, was the peers that I worked with. And that's a common. I see that a lot with senior leaders. They don't pay attention to that level across. You look up, you look down, but you don't look across. And those people, they often what you do. I mean, organizations are so tightly connected; it's hard to separate. You're not all siloed. The decisions you make and what your team is doing can affect their teams and their success. So really paying attention to peer relationships, and, it's just it wasn't on my radar, and
Yeah.
I learned the hard way.
What does that look? You said learn the hard way or stall. What did that look like for you in your career? Take us through one of those examples that you learned from.
Yeah, it wasn't pretty. It ended up my peers went to my boss, to, give him constructive feedback about me. I mean, and at first I thought, well, why wouldn't they come to me? But then on reflection, of course they weren't, because I was already not including them. So I didn't have an open relationship where they would have come to me naturally, but they went to my boss. It's one of those, we've all had those. Your boss calls you into the office and he starts talking, and, it's kind of, you go to like an out of body experience, hearing these stories and this feedback from your peers. I mean, I feel completely sabotaged. And it ended up, long story short, one of my peers got promoted before me, and I know it was because of that, and that was a hard acceptance to realize that, ultimately I owned it, and, my behavior towards my peers resulted in that unfortunate setback, and, I never forgot it though. The good thing is, you learn from your mistakes. And since then, I have paid very close attention to peer relationships and soliciting feedback regularly from
Yeah.
my peers.
Yeah, I mean, you just touched on one of the questions we comes up a lot in this podcast is, as a leader, how have you adapted to feedback that's hard to hear in your career? And it sounds like that's a good example of it.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Feedback, I it wasn't only on that peer relationship piece, but I often was my initial reaction was to feedback was deflection, pointing fingers, saying, "Oh, that wasn't me, that was so and so," or "Here's the situation." And now realizing that it's always I mean, it could be 80% the other person, but there's always a part of you. How you reacted, how you responded, and now I when I receive feedback, I slow down. That's probably my bad. Take a breath, just slow down, and then be curious. Ask questions. So, when you felt that way about how I reacted, or when I did that, how did that feel, or how did that impact you? I mean, just letting them share as much as possible about the details and about the behavior that you were exhibiting that created that outcome. And
Yeah.
that has been a huge help to
Yeah, I mean, being curious and taking the time to breathe and listen, such important lessons. John, who have been some of your mentors in your life, and what did you learn from them about leadership?
my mom. My mom was, a very strong leader, and I would use that. Her leadership was leading, a family of 7 and, navigating, some challenging times with the family. She was so supportive, sometimes to a fault. I share a story. It wasn't me, but it was one of my brothers who was not a great singer, but was in choir. It was kind of one of those elementary school things where he was in choir. And he just could not stay on pitch, and the teacher told him, might be better if you just mouth the words and not vocalize. So he came home and told
Ouch.
I
Ouch.
know, I know. And then he came home and told my mom, and oh boy, did she let the teacher have it. This is elementary school. This is, they're supposed to be creating, opportunities for kids to express themselves, and you tell my son to mouth the words. But I mean, that was just an example of how she just fought for her kids, and advocated, and was a great listener. And I think about some of the skills that I now have. I definitely know are tied to who she was and how she led in
Yeah.
her own way.
Yeah. And this isn't exactly, I mean, that's conflict, but it's a different kind of conflict. I wanted to ask you about, as a leader, how do you handle conflict on
Hmm.
your team, in the team, or what advice do you espouse to other leaders to handle conflict?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I'll talk about is, again, the power of the pause. So, when you encounter conflict, ensure that you pause and then ask those powerful questions. Just really listen, to what the situation is. So many times as a leader, your direct reports bring you situations and you're not a firsthand observer. You haven't experienced it. So it's second, third hand information. So taking the time to really investigate and listen and hear all of the different perspectives, before you make any kind of decision around that conflict is so important.
Yeah, and I think to that point, what I've learned is trust is also important. You have to be able They have to trust you to be vulnerable, right? And you have to be able to trust them, that
Yeah,
because you weren't there. So,
exactly. Yeah, vulnerability is such a part of leadership and trust. To your point, and trust. At least I would say trust is built slowly and incrementally, but it can be, wiped away with one unfortunate decision or situation where, you betrayed trust, and then you kind of start at ground zero. and you have to rebuild that trust. And as a leader, that is so foundational to how your leadership will be perceived and ultimately what kind of success you'll have.
Yeah, for sure. John, what's an example of a tough decision that you had to make in your career that you learned
Mm,
from as a leader?
yeah, it involved. It was actually one of my first leadership roles, and I became very unbalanced in my life, and I poured everything into my job. The job required a lot of that, but I also did more than, and that, honestly, that's been an ongoing challenge for me. I love, usually, I mean, there's been a few exceptions, but usually I love what I do. And so I want to pour everything into it. And, I didn't set the boundaries I needed to as a husband and as a father. And I learned pretty quickly, the hard way, that I needed to set more and better boundaries. And this is very common. You're at a point where you are progressing in your career, but if you are have a family, if you have children, they're often young at those same stages of your career. So as you're progressing, which is perhaps requiring more intensive time, your family needs you at that time as well. And so I made the difficult decision to actually leave that role so that I could provide better support to my family and ultimately have better balance. And at the time, that was a really difficult decision. And foolishly, I thought, oh, this is going to kind of be a career stopper. It wasn't. But, at the time when you have poured so much into it, and I was leaving, a good salary and many other benefits, that was by far the toughest decision that I've had to
Yeah.
make.
Yeah, recognizing it and then executing on it, two tough things. John, as we wrap up, or as we wrap up the podcast, but as we get into the beginning of 2026, what are you looking forward to most at the Leadership Center at the USF that you're getting out this curriculum?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm really excited about getting the word out, quite frankly, and just building the brand and the awareness that we're doing this at USF. It's still new in our community and in our marketplace, and we want to be here to serve the Tampa Bay region, and beyond, but ultimately those that are in our own backyard, those leaders. So I'm excited about getting the word out and starting to see the impact of the center in 2026. I believe that will happen, and we're going to work hard to let people know that we're here to serve you, and we want to be partners, and just to start to see the impact on leaders across our region is what I'm most excited about.
Excellent. Well, I'm curious and can't wait to hear more about it as you guys progress. Jon Kaupla, Center for Executive and Leadership Education at the Muma College of Business at USF. Thank you so much for joining us on From the Corner Office.
Thank you, Mark. It was a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you for listening to the Business Observer From the Corner Office podcast. I'm your host, Mark Gordon. This podcast was produced by Reed Corley of the Corley Company in Sarasota. To hear more episodes of From the Corner Office podcast, go to businessobserverfl.com.